Video 2, Chapter 1, Week 1, Environmental Science. Environmental impact, the idea of the commons, and a more detailed talk about sustainability. So what is environmental impact? Environmental impact refers to the alteration of the natural environment by human activity. And in general, impact equals the population times consumption, or more specifically, rates of population growth and the rates of a resource consumption and pollution generation all affect impact. Environmental impact is exponential with increasing population and industrial development, meaning that populations expand exponentially, doubling every given time period, as does the impact on the environment. Personal consumption increases throughput per person. Overall impact can be thought of as the number of individuals times the impact per individual. The industrialized countries, especially the USA, have much more impact than developing countries such as Africa per person. The population of the US is approximately 5% of the total world population, but citizens in the US consume over 30% of the world's goods. If you go to this link for the EPA gov.waste, you can look at how much waste municipalities and people actually produce. Throughput depletes and pollutes the environment. The higher the throughput or input, the higher the output or effect on the environment. And down below you can see growth in population times growth in consumption equals impact. So as consumption and pollution grow, more materials and energy move through society. This accelerates both depletion of resources and pollution. Depletion and pollution are two kinds of environmental impacts we see as a result of population and consumption growth. The overall impact of solid waste has grown as a result of increased population, and despite recent leveling off of the amount of waste per person. This pattern is typical of many other kinds of pollution. The overall impact of solid waste has grown as a result of increased population, despite that leveling off we talked about. This pattern is typical of every kind of pollution caused by human population. Solid waste output has increased from 2.65 pounds per person per day to 4.43 pounds per person per day from between 1965 to 2010 in the US. About 1.5 pounds of that is recycled material. Another 12% is burned to generate fuel, leaving about 54%, or about 2.9 pounds per person per day, put into landfills. Large-scale environmental impact of humans is a recent development in the history of the Earth and our species. As technology advanced, environmental impacts became more severe. Historians identify 5 basic stages of environmental interaction and thought. Gathering and hunting is the first stage. Up until 10,000 years ago, humans survived by moving animal herds or with animal herds, supplementing nutrition from forests and fields. Around 10,000 years ago, the agricultural and conservation stage began. So during the Neolithic or New Stone Age, tools began to be used for cultivation, which allowed populations to remain in one place and to grow with the abundance of food. Towns and cities were created, and land was cleared in large tracts for food production. As the agricultural age moved into the industrial, we come into the industrial and environmentalism age. The Industrial Revolution changed how goods and services were exchanged, how people lived, and how food was produced. This era resulted in rapid air and water pollution, as well as an environmental response from citizens. The final stage, the transition stage and sustainability, is our current stage. We label the current period transition because of the rapid increase in technology associated with work and social structures that has allowed us to analyze the impact we are having on the planet in real time. The use of big data allows society to see or model the costs of every action, including species extinction, water pollution, energy generation, etc. During this time period, the environmental movement is refocused on sustainability. Creating growth and wealth in a sustainable way is seen as a requisite to maintaining quality of life now and into the future. The final stage, this post-industrial stage in sustainability, is a big question mark. Who can predict the future? People try all the time and don't do a very good job. In the environmental future, scientists have predicted either a sustainable solution to post-industrial life or one where the population overshoots sustainability and there are dire consequences. One could make this argument based on current trends and past events. So it seems obvious that sustainability will require some change. Sustainability means meeting the needs of today without reducing the quality of life for future generations. Sustainability theory focuses on input reduction to reduce impacts versus treatment or sequestering of waste. Sustainability theory encompasses sociological factors like poverty and social justice, and economic solutions are often sought. An example of this would be CO2 capping and trading, where the actual cost of pollution is factored into the cost of production. Another way you could do this is by taxing the input. So ways to reduce technological impact are to use less technology, which is a huge question mark, use sustainable technology, and improve efficiency. Ways to reduce population and its impact include economic development and education, where the entire world population becomes educated. This is shown to reduce impacts on the environment. The higher the education, the lower the environmental impact. Paying the true costs of environmental services and development, and paying the true cost of imported resources. So if the cost of, for example, importing oil included the environmental damage done where that oil was drilled, oil would be more expensive. And you can still also combine this with the ways to reduce technological impact by using less technology, using sustainable technology, and improving efficiency, as we mentioned before. When market prices don't reflect the true cost of a produce, When market prices do not reflect all the true costs of a product or a service, the term market failure applies. In addition, or the addition of so-called green fees adjusts the costs of products and services to include environmental costs. The U.S. lags far behind most industrial nations in the uses of green fees. Cheap resources lead to high throughput and high pollution. Back to our throughput model. Whereas expensive resources leads to low throughput and lower pollution. This can be seen throughout the world today, as in my example that I talked about before with the cost of energy in other developed nations. The trend in the U.S. has been the continuation of cheap resources and free sinks for pollution. In many cases, the U.S. actively discourages conservation and encourages pollution through subsidies that reward these activities. For example, the low price of oil in the United States compared to the rest of the developed world promoted environmental degradation. Countries with higher taxes on fuel have developed low-emission cars and highly efficient building codes. How have recent price changes in the fuel changes transportation and power technology in Maine? Examples can be seen in hybrid and electric cars, as well as adaptation of wind farms, tidal energy, geothermal energy in new buildings, solar technologies, and better building codes. To promote sustainability, a major factor will be reducing the population on the planet. To defuse the so-called population bomb, we must address its central causes, which are often economic. Education is a start, but not enough. The survival needs of poor people must be met before they're willing to think about or act on global environmental protection issues. This is in agreement with the humanist model. And if you think back to the first video where certain needs have to be met first, people are going to meet their basic needs before they can think about their impact or long-term impact on the environment and their long-term needs. To promote sustainability, the individual has to be involved. The roots of all environmental problems ultimately lie in the values of the individual that comprise the society and develop the values of the society. We often avoid true costs to things, and we have to figure out why we do that and how we can pay for them. We do this through discounting the future, assuming that the cost of the future will be cheaper than they actually are, and discounting by distance, meaning it's not affecting me now, so therefore it's not affecting me as much. We need to expand our thinking beyond immediate concerns, or these issues will come at a huge cost to not only us, but our descendants. So all of us begin with the self, because infants and young children are preoccupied with their own needs. It's harder for people in poverty to extend their values beyond their immediate needs because they're in survival mode. How far can we extend our thinking beyond ourselves is a big question. But most sociologists think modern civilization is shrinking the sphere of concern. And can this trend be reversed? An ethical sequence in which the individual concerns extend outward beyond the self to progressively more inclusive levels is important to the environment. Whether this model is valuable or not shows how sustainability is a social issue and how environmental science is a cross-disciplinary study. So in this model, the self is at the beginning, and then we have these expanding areas of concern. And you'll see that the ecosystems in the earth is way out here after all of these inner ones are met. As I said before, whether you believe this model or you think this model is debatable or not, it does show the strong link between social science and environmental science. In order to bring many of these environmental and population issues under control, humanity must learn to evolve sustainably. This means meeting the needs of current generations without sacrificing the needs of future generations. There are two main schools of thought on the urgency of overpopulation and resource limitation on the planet. The cornucopians, who believe in technology and human ingenuity, will eventually solve all the problems, and that no work on their part is required in the current time frame. Exandras believe that human behavior will destroy their environment beyond repair, and therefore it is near hopeless to do anything during their lives. Both are extreme views, and it's good to rely on the precautionary principle as a moderate view between the two. Precautionary principle has four central components: taking preventive action in the face of uncertainty, shifting the burden of proof to the proponents of activity, exploring a wide range of alternatives to possibly harmful actions, and increasing public participation in decision-making. The principle is used by policymakers to justify discretionary decisions in situations where there is the possibility of harm from taking a particular course or making a certain decision when extensive scientific knowledge of the matter is lacking. So it's one way of dealing with uncertainty where the environment or impacts are concerned. The principle implies there's a social responsibility to protect the public from exposure to harm when scientific investigation has found a plausible risk. These protections can be relaxed only if further scientific findings emerge that provide sound evidence that no harm will result. So in some ways, it's like the Hippocratic Oath for the environment. First, do no harm. Review questions for this part of the Chapter 1 include: what is environmental impact? What are the two types and causes? What event changed the way people lived in the Neolithic, and why was it important to the impact on the environment? How is the concept of sustainability different than conservation or even traditional environmentalism? Why is the population as important an issue as consumption? And what is the precautionary principle?